Hello again, welcome to Randy in the shop. Today I'm working on the 400, the new motor that I'm putting together. Everything is back from the machine shop. Crank rods and pistons have been balanced. Previous video you see me filing piston rings, and so today I am installing the crankshaft. The crank is already in the block and the main caps are torqued. Torque the inner main cap bolts, which are 7/16, torque those to 65 foot-pounds, and the outer splayed 3/8 bolts in the center three main caps, those are 3/8 diameter, torque those to 35 foot-pounds. And I'm going to show you how to check the crankshaft end play. I'm going to move you over to the block and I will bring you right back. All right, I got you back over at the block with the crankshaft and the main caps installed. One thing you want to check, I always start with the center main cap first, do the center two bolts, and then move to the next cap, do the center two bolts, and then go alternating from front to back. Do these. After all the center bolts are tight, give the crankshaft a spin, and if it spins nice and freely, you're good to go. But at this point, if you feel anything where it feels tight or anything feels off, by all means stop and investigate. Try to figure out what is going on, where the tight is coming from, because you don't want to continue with it not feeling right. Otherwise you're going to have problems. There's something wrong. And what I did before I got this far is I installed all the main caps without the bearings in them and went to my bearing book. And in the bearing book, they will give you a housing diameter, plus or minus. It's generally like a 1/2 thousandth to 8/10 of a thousandth. And I used the dial bore gauge and checked it. They were all right on the money, right in the middle of the specification. And so then what I did is I installed the bearing in each main cap and went back to the bearing book, and it gives you the specification for the size of the main on the crankshaft. But also what you can do is mic the mains on the crankshaft itself, write those numbers down, and then for each bearing cap, for each journal, what you want to do is set your bore gauge for the size of the main journal on the crankshaft, and then put your bore gauge in with the bearing installed in the block, the top and the upper and the lower, the cap torqued down to specification, and see what your clearance is. I had between 2.8 and 3/1000 clearance on all the mains, except the rear one, because the rear bearing is a lot wider, so they want more oil clearance on it. I had 4.3/1000 clearance on the rear main bearing. And generally what I try to do is, for a stock build, I will go 1/1000 clearance on all the bearings, 1/1000 per inch of journal diameter. So this is 2.1/1000 here. It's 2.6 on the mains. So generally, if I'm, between like 1.9 and 2.4 on the connecting rods, that's good. And between 2.5 and 3 on the mains, that's perfect. You need a certain amount of clearance, and the more horsepower you make, where you're going to be putting more load on the mains and the connecting rods, you want to increase that clearance, just to maintain the oil film between the bearing and the connecting rod. in the connecting rod journal or the main journal, because that's what lubricates it. And if the bearing clearance is not enough, you'll have problems down the road. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a dial indicator here, and I'm going to show you how I check the crankshaft in play. Bring it right back. All right, I'm back. I got a dial indicator set up on the end of the crankshaft here, and what I do is I take a little pry bar like this here. I zero the dial indicator, and then what I do is I just, right there at 0, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the crankshaft, just lightly pushing it back, and I go the opposite way, and you can see right there that I have 4 thousandths clearance. They recommend 3 to 6 on your main, and after the rear bearing cap is bolted in, because your thrust is on the rear bearing cap on a small block Chevy, what I do is I take an aluminum grift on the end of the crankshaft here with a hammer, and I'll hit the crank toward the back of the motor, and then I'll go on the rear crankshaft flange, and I'll hit the crankshaft driving it forward, and what that does is it centers the thrust on the top and the bottom of the rear main, and then that's the most accurate way to set your rear main, and then so you can check it. So right there I have 0, and when I go the other way I have 4, or a little over 4 thousandths, 4.5, 4 and a couple tenths. But that's how you check the crankshaft in play. Bring it right back. All right, I got you back at the bench. What I use for lubrication on fasteners, unless they specify oil in the instructions that come with the new parts, the block, the rods, whatever, is I use this ARP Ultra Torque fastener assembly lube. I use that on all the fasteners. And then for lubricant on the bearings, what I do is this Lucas Oil heavy duty oil stabilizer, I will put a certain amount in a bottle like this here, and then take a quart of 30 weight motor oil, and I will mix it 50-50, shake it up real good, and that's what I use on the bearings. They sell a assembly like a lube guard. It's real thick. It'll be red and real thick and stringy. That's fine too, but I've been doing it this way for years. When I worked at the dealer, they specified for assembly of motors at the dealer using a 50% mix of engine oil supplement and motor oil, and that's just the way I've always done it. And before the motor is run, you're gonna prime the pump, which primes the oil system, and then put your distributor in and then fire it. So I don't see any need for something that's really thick, because sometimes that thick lubricant in there will make the crankshaft really hard to turn, because it is so thick. And then if you have a binding problem, you can't feel it. This here, the crankshaft spins really freely with the 50% engine oil and the oil stabilizer, and that's just my choice. So anyway, a couple little tips on that, and now I'm going to work on assembling the connecting rods, putting the pistons on the connecting rods, putting the spiral locks in, that hold the floating rest pin in the piston, and that's pretty much not a big deal. And then when I get ready to install the piston rings, I will bring it back. Until then, have a great day. Thanks for watching.